Hey, and hello everyone. Good morning. In the Good morning. So, in the interest of staying on time, could everyone please mute yourself? Thank you. So, in the interest of staying on time, I will get started, and we will have some people joining in, but hopefully they'll be able to catch up soon enough. A very good morning, everyone. My name is Rajiv Burman, and I work with GrowthSource, and on behalf of GrowthSource and Wetworks, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our live webinar on effective employee engagement in times of crisis. And our speaker today is Don Hummons. He's a behavioral psychologist and a coach to leaders in Fortune 100 companies. Don is an American who is currently based in Australia. And those of you who attended our first webinar on April 9th would know that he's a very engaging and a thoughtful speaker. We had over 100 participants in that webinar, and 76% of respondents rated the webinar and the content very good or excellent. We also have with us Iris Hainstock. She's an international success coach with special interest in neuroscience. Iris is based in Canada. So welcome to both Don and Iris from India. We have 90 minutes today and will close on time at 11:30 a.m. India time. A few housekeeping announcements. Please keep your audio on mute till we reach a Q&A session and ask you to unmute yourself if you have a question. This will avoid any background noise and disturbing the rest of the participants. If you have any comments or questions, please use the chat box. My colleague and partner Vikas Malhotra will be collecting these throughout the session, and at appropriate times, he will raise them with Dawn so we can have an interactive session. This session is being recorded and will be shared with all participants later this week. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dawn. Thank you, Dawn. Please take it over. Dawn, we're not able to hear you right now.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yep, that's good.
Okay, sorry about that. Well, I was talking to myself, so I guess I'll start all over again. Well, good morning to each and every one of you in India. And it is an honor and a pleasure to be with you this morning. Over the next 4 weeks, we're going to have an opportunity to get to know one another because we will be discussing things of global importance to us all. And managing teams during this time is extremely important. So we want to look at the totality of engagement, productivity, employee well-being, management. How do you deal with work from home employees now? Because that's going to become a mainstay from this point forward. Now, I'm just getting a little feedback in my ear. So can I ask everyone to turn their microphones off, please? Okay, that's much better. Thank you.
And Don, sorry, this is Rajiv. Can I also request, given bandwidth issues, if everyone can please switch off your videos and keep yourself on mute. switch off your videos and please
अभी
keep yourself on mute.
नहीं मैं मीटिंग में हूँ.
Go ahead, I can see.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you please put yourself on mute and switch off your video? Great, thank you so much. So once again, keep yourself on mute throughout till we request you to open it up.
Okay, so we'll try it again. So again, thank you so very much. What this is really designed to do is to help you understand how best to deal with a global problem that every organization in the world is actually facing right now today, no matter where they are in the world. So what was fascinating for me is India and America have a great relationship, and some of the people who are actually leading the fight against the coronavirus come from one of the universities in my hometown of Los Angeles, California, who's Indian.
Hello.
And he actually is responsible for some of the epidemiological studies that are being done. And he's actually also being responsible for the new models that are now coming out saying really what's going on in terms of the number of people who will contract the virus, or they may have.
I know.
And my hope and my feeling is that the work that he and his team at Stanford University is actually doing is going to go global within the next 2 weeks, definitely by next month for sure. So this is just showing what we can do when we actually work together. One of the interesting things that I want to talk about today as we get started is that for the first time in human history, globally, we are facing a problem where we have the combined might, the will, the science, the neuroscience, and even the finances to fight a global problem. However, there are still things that we need to be able to deal with and navigate with. So, part of today is going to be talking about solutions as it relates to leading teams through the situation that we happen to be finding ourselves in now. And so, a lot of teams will be working from home. So, we're going to talk about the internal communication and external communication, which are extremely important because both of those combined will engage people at a much deeper and different level, but that will all depend upon how we actually communicate with one another throughout the process. So the coronavirus pandemic actually is a three-part problem for all of us. One is social, emotional, and financial. The financial will actually impact the emotional and the social. So even though people might be working from home, there is still a requirement to get some work done. There's still going to be quotas, there's still going to be KPIs. All of these things are always going to be part of the process. So the financial impact that the world is now actually experiencing is leading into the emotional aspect and leading into the social. So you're going to have to understand how to properly communicate with one another as a manager, as how do you deal with the emotional issues that arise as a manager? How do you deal with the social implications? Because we're all social people. This part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, all of the pieces that makes us human reside just in this front part right here, and that's where all the social connectivity actually comes in at. So when we understand from a neuroscience perspective or a brain-based perspective, having the ability to actually communicate to the person's brain is actually going to be extremely powerful. So as we get into this, I just want you to understand a few things. Communication will refer to the types of communication processes, systems, and structures to ensure that there is a shared information amongst all the stakeholders. So that means we need to create effective awareness of the health risk that the coronavirus does present, even as an employer, even though that employee or team member may be working from home. How to promote new behaviors. When you think about it, the coronavirus has caused everybody in the world to change their actual behaviors, especially the social behaviors. Yeah, you guys are still locked down, I think, until the 28th. Um, Parts of America is actually going to have a rolling uh, coming out of being on lockdown, and other parts of the country will start the process ever so slowly. Would you move to the next slide, please? And I forgot, because we're having a communication snafu, Rajiv is being so kind to look at the deck. So as I said earlier, the coronavirus pandemic is a three-part problem: social, emotional, and financial, and that the communication is going to have to be key to what we actually use to combat the virus itself and to come together as more productive and powerful teams. Next slide, please. So, and I was just saying, for the purposes of this webinar, the communication will refer to the types of processes and systems and structures to ensure that there is a shared understanding about this problem and how it relates to your organization among all the stakeholders. That includes board members, employees, vendors, your entire supply chain. It will include everyone, what your organization will do in order, or how it will actually function in order to stay viable. And communication is going to be the key. So I said, well, we'll have to create a new awareness and risk behaviors with this type of a pandemic. Will we go back to the way that we used to do things just a month ago or 2 months ago, and definitely by the beginning of the year? This pandemic is actually promoting new behaviors. As organizations, you are going to have to promote new behaviors that your organization wishes to live by, and those new behaviors will change. Now, understand that behavior is actually a habit, which is influenced by the social interactions. It is influenced by societal interactions and all of the belief systems that come into play within your organization, your personal lives, and where you play. So new behaviors will have to come in. So we're going to probably wind up start teaching change behavior all over again. We just came through how to bring an organization through change about 5 to 10 years ago, and it's going to come back in again because the work from home is going to be here with us to actually stay. We're going to have to understand how proper communication allows organizations to operate more productively as possible. We will have to keep all shareholders and regulators even more satisfied, or the governments will have to relax the rules. And then we're going to have to create an environment for the best possible recovery. And as we get into this, you'll see I'll talk about a red team and a blue team in just a minute. Next slide, please. All of this proper communication leads to or removes the uncertainty. Those of you that were on the call last week, we talked about trust and how trust removes uncertainty. And when you're removing uncertainty, it actually promotes the release of oxytocin. Oxytocin is one of the main feel-good hormones or neurotransmitters that we freely release all the time. And by releasing large amounts of oxytocin, it engages us in trust. I am going to have a handout that you will get at the end. I'm sorry, it'll go out with the survey because I didn't have it in time. But I just want to spell out just real quickly why trust is so important. And you see it's a trust with a period after each letter. Well, those of you who were last week, you understood that trust equals transparency. Now, we've all heard that before, but what we haven't heard before is why is that so important? Transparency is important to the language of the reptilian brain. That's the part of our brain that reacts very quickly. That is the one that is responsible for the amygdala outbreak. It is, or the amygdala hijacking, and it is that part of the brain that allows us to become very hurt very quickly. So when we are releasing more trust, we have the opportunity to reduce the threat response that the body and the brain will automatically go through. And by having that level of trust, it will actually activate the reward systems in the brain. So that means that we will open up more. We will have a common sharing of all threats. So the coronavirus is a global threat. So no matter who you talk to in the world, believe it or not, that is the number one, two thing that may be on someone's mind. So you can actually start a conversation or have an elevator pitch with someone and talk about the coronavirus, and everybody will be basically on the same page. When we have the trust, we can actually understand and feel someone's intentions and aspirations and objectives. And that's really going to be important moving forward. So the R stands for relationships, which is the language of the heart brain. Again, if you were with us last week, I shared with you that we actually have a neural net that sits over our heart. That neural net is responsible at the moment, we think, for emotional learning. That is very, very powerful, because the minute that we feel threatened, when our heart brain shuts down, then our health goes down. We are in adversarial relationships. So I know many of you out there have employees that you just come together loggerheads with. Well, I'm going to teach you a technique how to stop that, because you're the person that is supposed to lead them out of that. You want them to follow you. So you want them to follow you not from a position of fear, but from a position of old school love. And this is not touchy-feely. These are things that we now know what the brain actually responds to. The U stands for understanding, which is the language of the limbic brain. The limbic brain is where we bring all the information that's coming into us, particularly into our brains, together. We try to make sense of things. We make sense of a frown. We make sense of a smile. We also know, as being able to understand, if we can look at a person's face, then we can pretty much determine what their impact upon us is going to be and what their intention towards us is going to be. So we have two types of smile. We actually have a polite smile, which is just where the corners of the mouth will just appear. It doesn't really show anything. It just very polite. But then you have an authentic smile, which is that big smile where your teeth are showing, you get brows in your forehead, and everything about you just lights up. Now, that's the type of manager, boss, CEO, CFO, whatever that I want to work for, because I can always tell that person's intention where I'm coming from. So the S stands for shared success, which is really, really powerful. So that's the language of the neocortex. That is the newer part of the brain that then determines how I see myself in light of that person or in view of that thing. So if my neocortex is not under threat, then I'm going to share more, number one. Number two, I'm actually going to bond with you. And believe it or not, we are designed and created for human contact to bond. And here's one from a mental health perspective: bonding with your fellow employees or bonding with your team is the fastest way to get to creativity and the fastest way to get to productivity. You can actually go to the next slide, please. Rajiv, I keep forgetting that I'm actually not controlling the deck. So just go to the
So,
next slide.
Don, we have a question at this time. Would you want to take the question right now?
Yes. That's okay.
Okay,
Yep.
sure. So Ashok has asked, when threat is perceived, how does trust kickstart?
When threat is perceived, how does trust do what?
Kickstart. So how does it? How does trust come in when threat is perceived?
Well, if a threat is perceived, trust doesn't come in. Trust actually shuts down. So you're not releasing oxytocin anymore. You're actually releasing cortisol. which means that you are now forced into determining whether this person is going to hurt me or not. So then you go into the fight, freeze, or freeze frame. So even in a situation where someone is actually sitting at work and they're sitting down, if you're talking to a person and that person feels they are under threat, you will actually physically see them shut down. So trust actually is lost at that point. You really move into what is called transactional trust. So, which means that I will only trust you as far as I can see that you're not going to hurt me, even though you have actually increased my threat response by something that you said, something that you did. If you raised your voice, your body will pick up on all of that within 1/10 of a second. So trust, if a threat is perceived, trust does not come from that. One has to perceive that you actually understand where they're coming from. You have to speak to them in a manner that says, "Hey, I'm with you. I know things are a little bad right now, but we're going to get through this together."
Thanks, Don. Don, we have two more. Uh, Don, were you trying to say something? I'm sorry. Did I interject?
No, it's somebody else is talking. Somebody else is talking. Go ahead.
And we request you to please mute yourself. Okay, so Don, one is a request and another question. The request is, can we see Don? Can you please put on your video, please?
My camera is on.
Okay, we can't see you, so maybe if there's a glitch, we'll let it be like that. The other thing is,
because
yeah,
we are able to see it. So I'm able to see him.
okay, great. So maybe it's coming up for me. Okay, great. So the second question is, how do you balance trust across employees and board of directors seamlessly as every day brings in news that attempts to disturb the simple paradigm of being truthful and transparent to all? It's a long question. Let me know if you want me to repeat it.
No. A lot of people around the world know I like drinking margaritas, and no offense to anyone who's in the audience who doesn't believe in drinking alcohol. I like drinking margaritas. That is the best antidote to help you navigate between board members and your other team. Now that's the unofficial answer. The more official answer is really to develop a place of trust with the board by following some of these techniques that I have shared with you already. Actually, Rajiv, can you go back one slide? Which I'm sorry, no, you're okay. Yeah, you're right there. That's fine. So, the board is a stakeholder. The board also needs to be engaged. The board also needs to perform. The board also needs to have some form of retention and well-being and innovation. But there are rules to get the board to understand this. And part of that, the transparency, the trust as it's spelled out and things I was just discussing, you don't have that slide, but we will send that to you on when you send out the surveys on how this actually went and was it beneficial to you. So on there, you will see trust spelled out and what it actually means and what it's actually doing for us. When it comes to the board, the board is always going to be about business. The board is going to be task over relationship because the board is there to make sure that the company runs and there's money and everybody's happy and things are being produced. We've seen a shift in the past 25 years of how boards should be running. The board should put the heart first, which means you still can take care of business. You can still make sure that people are actually coming on and they're doing their task, they're doing their skills, and they're making money. But now you just do it from a heart perspective. Again, not necessarily touchy-feely, but making sure that people understand we're in this together. You've always spin it. Let me ask you a question. You don't need to answer this, but this is just rhetorical. How do you think Apple, Google, Microsoft, Dell Computers, Amazon, how do you think they got to be so big? Because their original owners understood the human heart. Their owners understood how the brain operates. I know because I taught many of them that. So we know that if a board, a business owner, management, HR, if they understand how the brain operates and what people are triggered to on a positive level and a negative level, those boards and that company begins to go. And I'll tell you a real simple secret. It's just one paper that actually you can write down, and hopefully we'll do a class on this that will help you go from here to here by understanding everything that I just told you. And this is something that Apple does, Starbucks coffee around the world, McDonald's, you name it, all these top Fortune 100 companies, they all do the same thing. It's on one piece of paper. And trust me, the board is looking at that one piece of paper every single day. And I'll tell you more about that later. Okay. Next slide, please.
Thank you for clarifying, John.
Thank you. No problems. So what we want to establish in order to help people get to a place where there is normalcy as best we can, that we can get back to where there's a high amounts of engagement that actually comes from the management team. So the crisis management team has to consider a few things. The coronavirus actually, there are three problems running concurrently. One, the virus itself. These are facts. Number two, the panic about the virus. And number three is the one that you're probably most concerned about, which is what are the business and economic implications? So the virus itself is fairly well known what it is, what it's doing. We know how to defeat it. We are in the process of developing an actual shot to, it'll be like a flu shot. So we are going to develop something here soon, and I'd say, look, give the world bodies that are working on this collectively at least another 90 days, and there will be a vaccine for this. It's already in testing right now, and you may have heard of what they are. Chloroxyquin is one of them that's been used for over 75 years. Another malaria drug has been used for over 80 years. Both of those combined are doing a very good job of knocking the virus out of people so that they can live. There are extant stories where people on one day they were at death's door, they took this cocktail and boom, they were getting up, walking around within 12 hours. One lady, one of our congresswomen had it. She had other comorbidities and her doctor gave it to her. Her doctor was on the air with her and he testified that she was at death's door, gave it to her. Within 1 hour, she was feeling better again. So we know about the virus. We know how to quell or quelch the panic about the virus. Those of us who are in positions of authority, believe it or not, people are looking at us to see how we're going to handle this. What are we saying about this? And thirdly, we do all have to be concerned about the business and economic implications. Think about this. America has spent $5 trillion in combating this. That's just in loans and guarantees and employment benefits. Australia, where I currently reside, we spent pretty close to $2.5 trillion. And trust me, Australia doesn't have the money. So it's going to be kind of interesting what they come up with. But, for those of us who run organizations or we lead teams, this is really, really important. So we're going to have to set pragmatic objectives from a communication perspective. What is our organization going to do? And believe me, just because your team is not talking about coronavirus, it is the number one thought on their brain, and it has to be. So as organizations, as team members, as team managers, you're going to have to set aside time to have open and frank conversations with your teams about what's happening. And these three things will be top of mind. Next slide, please. And why it will be top of mind is because those of you that was with us last week, I showed you when there is uncertainty, the brain reacts emotionally. If you're not talking about the water cooler topic, which is coronavirus, even from an emotional health perspective, you should get together with your team and just say, hey, what's going on? What's on your mind? How are you guys doing at home? How's the kids going? How's the dogs doing? I mean, you'd be amazed at how much more productivity you can get out of your team by asking them something personal. And I realize that in a business setting, that has been taboo for years. But I'm telling you, many organizations actually understand the power of removing uncertainty. So the type of emotional reaction they get is actually pretty positive. So this is really important. So this chart here just simply tells us how the brain creates a concept of self as it relates to a person, place, or thing. As you see the brain, we've got the prefrontal cortex, and part of the thing has slid off. You got the neocortex, the limbic brain, the amygdala. These are all key areas that you as managers have to be concerned about. So if a person's amygdala is always on high alert, they're not going to be as functional, they're not going to be as productive, and they're not going to be very happy about the job that they happen to be in. Because as you look at the cycle, what information are they receiving about the organization? What information are they receiving about you as a manager? What senses are being ignited? Is it going through the ears, eyes, nose? Are they able to touch? What senses are actually being affected? And if it's negative, that's going to lead to negative emotions. They're not going to want to trust you. And gaining trust, people have said it's hard to get trust. No, it's not. It's actually very easy to get trust. And the best way that you can get trust is smile at someone. Their brain will actually take over. So even if you've done something wrong to hurt them in the past, if you give them a genuine smile and not a polite smile, their brain will release oxytocin. That oxytocin will influence them to actually bond with you. So it will actually cause a bit of a conflict. Just yesterday you were yelling at me, today you're smiling at me. I'm not really for sure, but if you keep smiling at me, okay, I'll come around. That is how you turn around companies. That is how you have dynamic and powerful families. Just smile. Oh, here's one better. For those of you who have your families at home, I'm going to give you some homework. And next week, I want you guys to report on your survey. When you go home tonight and you see your kids, you see your partner, I want you to put your arm around them and hold on to them and count to 10. It'll look like this. Honey, I had a really great day, or I had a bad day. I'm happy to be home with you right now. Thank you. How was your day? I promise you there will be a change in that person's emotions relating to you. And all you tough guys out there who don't like to hug, hug. I'm telling you, we're all designed to respond to touch. So you want the most positive emotions, and then that will actually get up into the language and meaning that the language that you use and the meaning over time will lead to the experience within leads to the concept of self and how you then filter information and what biases you use to process that information. And right now, we all have biases about coronavirus. We all have biases about whether or not we're going to have a job next week, whether or not I'm going to get paid next week, whether or not I can pay my bills. These are all real biases and filters and things that we have to do right now. But as a boss, as a team leader, if you understand the brain and how the brain operates, you can change people's lives. Next slide, please. So in order to achieve this, we need two things. Number one, we need a red team and a blue team. Now, the red team is probably the most important because their focus is on crisis management. We are in a crisis, so we need to create a group that will then speak with one voice. They have the ability to respond quickly. They are proactive towards key stakeholders. In this case, we're talking about your employees. And number three, they understand the importance of social media. Now, so why social media? Because you know what? Geez, I wouldn't say this, but I'll say it today. Today is my birthday. And this morning at 7 a.m., I received a bunch of text messages saying, happy birthday, Don, happy birthday. One person had a picture of a glass of a margarita since they know I like margaritas, and it's part of my shtick when I'm teaching other things. And I just felt so comfortable and I felt so warm. And it was at 7 a.m. in the morning, and I just got out of bed and I was ready for you guys today. I was so pumped and excited and ready to have some fun. So that was a good use of social media. I had a talk with a person who was in a panic about whether or not they're going to be working tomorrow. And part of my mental health responsibilities was to see what was really bothering that person and then to move them into a place where they could think differently and be better for themselves. And all I did was send them a quick, message via WhatsApp. And we went back and forth for about 2 minutes. And at the end of it, there was a smiley face saying, "Thank you, you're awesome." Social media. Let me tell you guys, send your team a text message. "Hey, I know you're doing a great job. I know things are tough." You'd be surprised how quickly that attaboy makes them feel, and they will walk through a wall on fire for you. The blue team. Oh, that's a fun team. The blue team focuses on where the organization wants to be after the crisis. You have to have a plan in place after this is over with. I believe you guys actually are able to come off of forced lockdown, I believe, on the 28th. Well, does that mean that people are going to go back to work? Does that mean you're going to go back to work as usual? Are you going to have to keep some form of social distancing? Are you going to have 3 feet between you? And if you are, then everyone is not going to be able to go back to work. And that means people are still going to have to work from home. How are you going to handle that? Are you going to switch off? Are you going to have 1 week or 1 month, one part of the team is at home and the other part is actually physically in the office? Or are you going to go back the other way? That will all depend upon what the Indian government and health minister says about how do we deal with social distancing and all of these wonderful things that we have to consider. But that's going to be the responsibility of the blue team. What do we want to do? What do we want to look like? How do we want to be? How do we want to present ourselves? How do we want to be in a place that says this is the new normal, but the new normal is actually okay? Social distancing, yeah, it has its points. Maybe, you don't have a 100% capacity in the office anymore. That's all right. So maybe the team that's working from home, maybe they get together as a group once or twice a week, go to the local park, go play soccer, go do something that will alleviate the stress from just being at home. They too are going to have to learn a new way of communicating. Part of my mental health responsibilities here in Australia is actually working with people who are suddenly finding themselves at home with their spouses and their children practically 24/7. And you can imagine the amount of stress that's on everybody. Even the cats and dogs are not happy that masters are at home all the time. And the kids are freaking out because dad is not playing with them. They're used to him being gone all the time, 2 weeks at a mine and 1 week at home, or 3 weeks away and 2 days away, back at home. That's the routine that they have grown into. And so now even the partners are not knowing how to communicate. So part of my responsibility is to teach people how to communicate on an interpersonal level. This is something that your blue team will have to focus on. Next slide, please.
Don, first of all, I wish you a very happy birthday. Sorry we missed wishing you earlier. You're getting a lot of birthday wishes on the chat box.
I didn't even see them. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, and there are a couple of questions here. One, Ratin asks, in today's scenario, sometimes leadership has to communicate hard decisions to team about salary cuts, downsizing, etc. How to still ensure positivity and team motivation?
How to instill all of that when you have to tell someone that the company's downsizing or we're going to have to cut salaries? Well, it will depend upon if you really understand what I'm trying to communicate to you right now. Trust. If you actually go to a person honestly, because we can take the truth, just tell the truth in a loving manner. Let me give you a scenario. Rajiv, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, Vikas, can you come back on, please? I'll walk you through this real quick. Okay.
Yes, I'm there.
So okay. So all right. Okay, good. So both of you, here's the quick scenario. I've got to reduce hours on both of you. Both of you are sitting in my office. That's the setup. So Vikas and Rajiv, as you know, that the world is going through a major problem at the moment. So that means that all supply chains throughout the world has been disrupted. We do not have the capacity to pay both of you at the same salary that you are currently employed under. I have two options. They're very brutal, but I just want to tell you my heart. If you guys decide to go elsewhere and find another job or look for more work, I will fully understand that and I will support that. I will make sure I write you the best recommendation letter that I can actually muster. However, if the two of you decide to stay, I'm going to have to reduce your salaries by 35, maybe even 40%, and it may even drop to 50%. I just want to tell you what's on my heart about this, and I just have to tell you the truth because I can't make it any easier or any worse. Okay, now, as I was saying that, can you tell me the emotions that were running through your minds quickly? Did you feel that I was being authentic and real when I said what I said?
Yeah. So this is
Yeah, and
Rajiv.
yeah, Rajiv, go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I felt it was very direct and clear, and you were relaying news which you were not happy about, um, and yet it was something that had to be done. So you were doing the best under the circumstances. That's how I felt.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Because what did you feel?
Yes, I think my thoughts were projected more towards you, and I was feeling that empathy flowing from you,
Mm-hmm.
and hence I think the gravity of the news you were giving me, it kind of subsided for me. So it was cushioned from that point of view, and yes, I mean it came direct. I understood, but I also understood that you cared, and that
Mm-hmm.
was, that's where a lot of my thoughts were projected. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Thank you both. Yeah, and you see that's what this is about. Also, if you notice, my hands was touching my heart. My camera's not up that high, but I was actually touching my heart, and I was using my hands to explain the pain that I'm actually in, having to come to you to tell you I've got to reduce your salaries, or you may have to look for other work. You see, that's based on trust, and what I did for both of them, even though I'm 18,000 miles away from all of you, I just practiced the first part of trust. I was transparent, so I spoke to the reptilian brain, so I quiet their amygdala. Number two, I spoke to the heart brain by explaining to them what was going to happen in a caring and candor manner. I gave them, the understanding of what this actually is doing to me, and I can understand where they're coming from. I also told them what the shared success would look like. In this case, it would be if they needed to go and find other work, I would give them a letter of recommendation. That's really important. I couldn't test the assumptions here because this is not a real scenario, but I got TRUS already down because I spoke to their heart. I reduced the threat response and I actually increased the reward response. So when you're actually talking to someone, if you got to give them bad news, please be as transparent as possible and recognize that you're actually speaking to the reptilian brain. That's the part that's actually going to go off and start yelling, and they'll get scared and they become the 2-year-old asking mom for food. So this is really important. These are things that we've learned over the past, I'd say 75 years, how to manage and deal with people actually during a crisis. Okay. So the crisis communication leadership, there are two key things that we have to understand in a crisis. Number one, it is a time for critical decisions. Every manager, every owner, every board has to make critical decisions. One of the key factors is if you are still lucky enough that you actually have employees, you guys are going to have to resist the need for micromanaging. No human being on the planet wants to be micromanaged, not even you. And some people actually who have been micromanaged they micromanage other people because it's a learned behavior, not a response, but a learned behavior. So you're going to have to resist that, because when you have remote workers, your natural impulse is to think they're not doing the work because they're at home. Well, guess what? You're at home too. So you have to be careful how you actually manage. Don't micromanage is the key thing. The other clear crisis point that here needs to happen is that they are clear distractions away from the main work of the organization. Coronavirus has taken every ridiculous, dumb thing everybody wants to do right off the 5 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 9 o'clock news. We're not hearing much about climate change. We're not hearing about gender identity. We're not hearing much about gender politics. We're not hearing a lot about that right now. Why? Because we have a bigger fish to fry. And that bigger fish to fry is, how do we keep the world going? Not just America, not just India, not just Canada, not just Australia. How do we keep the world going? So as we begin to move into this new unforeseen arena, we're going to have to make better decisions. And so leadership has got to be able to communicate all of this as quickly as possible. Next slide, please.
Don, the second question,
Yep.
yeah. So I'm going to try and do the best, because I feel I understand this not fully, but this is probably about the internal dialogue the person wants to ask, and this is Bobby trying to ask, do I have the same conversation with myself as I have with the others? So, for example, even if I'm an HR manager, now the way I converse with others, how do I converse with myself?
Same way. Tell yourself the truth. Love yourself. Listen to your favorite music. If you like rock music, listen to your favorite rock music. If you like playing soccer, of course, you can't go outside and play soccer right now, so you may have to watch some reruns of soccer movies or whatever. Now's the time to get back in touch with the things that makes you feel you, meaning you are at your best. For example, for me, I would show you my reef tank at the moment, but right now I'm having a problem with my reef tank, so I'm not going to show it to you. But that's the thing. That's how I talk to myself. I look at how my corals are doing, or I'll go out and I'll have a walk in my little area that I can walk in, and I will tell myself how good I actually am, how I've helped someone, how I've encouraged someone. There hasn't been a day that's gone by since we've been on lockdown that there are 3 people I encourage every single day, and they just happen to be my neighbors. And so when I actually talk to them, I get energy, so that when I'm actually talking to someone on a mental health level, I'm actually able to communicate better with them. So the language that you have to talk to yourself with is, number one, just be as transparent with yourself as possible. Tell the truth. This is where a reality check comes in. Hey, boss, how you doing today? Oh yeah, I'm great. But your facial expression shows you're not great, or your behavior shows you're not great, or your attitude shows you're not great. So reality time has to come into play, where you actually tell yourself, you know what, I'm not having a good day. Incidentally, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. Anybody who is stressing out from a mental health perspective, you pick up the phone, Skype, email me, and then we'll have a talk to make sure that you are okay. Because as a leader, we often don't take care of ourselves first. And you have to take care of yourself first, so that you can be productive, you can be encouraging, you can support your fellow employees, your other team members, but most importantly, you have to have that internal dialogue about yourself, about where you really are. So you need to be transparent with yourself. You need to understand your relationships around you. Now that people are home a lot more, maybe now's the time to spend a little bit more time with your partner. Maybe you need to have a quiet moment. I am a romanticist at heart, and I think it's great when two people can sit down and they can honestly look at each other in the eye and tell each other how they actually feel. You can't get there until you have that conversation with yourself first. So love your neighbor as you love yourself. And that's very internal. So you need to look inside. What do I really feel? How do I really feel? Is what I'm feeling, is it truth or am I making it up? Okay, you can go to the next slide, which was, next slide, please, Rajiv. So leadership must firstly demonstrate that they understand the duty of physical and mental well-being they have for all employees. You guys who are in positions of authority, you are by nature in positions of trust. So you must understand right now, this is not business as usual. Everyone's emotional and mental health is on high alert. If you are in a position of authority over other people, please be mindful of that. Don't raise your voice. Don't demand. If you just have a conversation with people, people will respond. We're actually hopefully going to do a workshop on words and the tone with which and how words are actually used and what that's actually doing to your brain when you hear those words in a given tone. So mental well-being, your employees right now need to know that's more important than the task. You heard me say earlier, task above relationship. You need to have relationship above the task. The task will get done. Trust me, if you develop deeper and more meaningful and transformational relationships with your teams. Next slide, please. So why is all this important? Well, here's a graph for you. So if you don't communicate properly, if you don't have transparency, then your employees will, and you too will be stuck at level one, which is the resistor skeptic phase. You're never ever going to really move. You'll do what you're supposed to do, but there's low levels of trust with it. If the manager increases their level of communication in terms of they're a little bit more open, then you will still wait and see. It's now conditional trust or transactional trust. But now when you actually share with another person, so, and by that I mean, so maybe you call your team leader up and you say, hey, how's everything going with you? How just talk to me. Tell me how you're really doing emotionally. Wow, you went from resistor, you took them from being a resistor all the way to a person who's going to co-create with you. You will start to hear this word co-creation more now than we ever have in the past 25 years. Co-creation is the secret to productivity. It is the secret to engagement. It is the secret to creativity. You want to see your team become the best team, even if you have to go to them and say, hey, listen, we need to reduce your pay or we need to reduce your hours. You can do all of that as long as you get to the right side of the chart, the green side of the chart. Sorry, my right, your left. And you see co-creation, high levels of trust. That means transparency and the two bullet points underneath them, the reward response is always going to be very high. Every time they see you, think about you, they're going to have high levels of oxytocin, which will give them high levels of trust and bonding. And that means you will ask them, so Don, tell me about the project you're working on. And they start to tell you, you just don't leave it there. You say, oh, okay, well, did you think about this? And you do that in a curious way. Last week before last, I opened up the session with bend your judgment and be curious. I forgot to do that today, so I'm going to do it now. Be curious with your employees, because if you remain curious, and I think we even had someone who worked in the military and it posed a different challenge. Even if you have to command people what to do, you can still do it in a manner that does not threaten their brain, because their brain will automatically want to protect itself. I told you about General Norman Schwarzkopf, one of our great generals. This guy got people to do things that they didn't think they could do. Why? His secret was that he co-created with them. He told them who the enemy was. He told them what we could and could not do. He was very explicit, so he was transparent. He was always out amongst his men, so he was developing and building relationships. He understood their positions. He understood what they have to do. He also understood that some of them weren't going to come home. He told them what success looked like, and he tested out the assumptions of the things that he said by following this chart right here. This is something that is very powerful. You get someone to go from distrust to trust. And oh, by the way, we wake up every day in a distrustful state because we had a bad sleep or we had an argument or we have to go to work. So we wake up in a distrustful state. We can move away from it pretty quickly, usually about 0.3 of a second, but we can move away from it. And this is all based upon the prefrontal cortex versus the amygdala. Wake up with a smile on your face. Try cooking breakfast for your wife and your kids. Try smiling with your kids. I mean, I know a lot of you guys do that stuff anyway, but really do it from a point that makes sense. Find something within your spouse that you know is lacking and try helping them out and watch the difference in your relationship. Those of you that are having kids who are starting to challenge you because they're starting to get a little bit older now, or they're at that challenging stage, instead of getting upset, try having a conversation with them. Try being transparent. Try understanding that the language that they're using to get what they want is based upon what they did in the womb and also based on what they did when they were from 1 to 3. They couldn't communicate. Communication is a very powerful tool. Next slide, please. So what are some of the important issues that we have to consider as management with COVID-19? Next slide. It's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. We have to consider emotional responses anchors trust. Proper emotional responses will anchor trust. I'm going to keep driving trust until you guys get it, because when we come on the other side of all of this, you will start to use this more now, more than you ever will you ever have in the past. Trust is not just based upon transaction, it's based upon being transformative. Your employees don't care about all the dumb stuff that they feel are dumb things that organizations have to go through. They just care about whether or not they have a job and they get paid. That is their initial response. But if you begin to anchor trust and develop and build trust within them, that mindset will actually change, and that's what you want. Okay? Leaders need to understand that their response to something is always going to be emotional, just as it is for you. We all give emotional responses. We don't give logical responses like we think that we do. Our response is emotional, and the prefrontal cortex says that's the justification for my emotional response. And emotional responses can be very quiet. They don't have to yell. They don't have to be upsetting, and they don't have to be angry. So these are all things that we're going to now have to take a look at as we move into this new arena. The more specific you are in your communications, the more considered trustworthy that you will actually come across to each one of your team members, and more importantly to yourself. So someone asked the question, what is the internal dialogue I have to have with myself? Well, just be specific. COVID-19, coronavirus is a fact. There is a vaccine that is on the way. Not as many people are actually dying from this. People, yes, are getting sick, but we do have drugs that people can use right now today, and people are being just fine. So be specific. Understand that your emotions will actually influence their emotions, which will influence their behavior. Next slide, please.
Don, there is a question from Melvin. What if the team member has inherent distrust with everyone they operate with? How to connect with such members? So if the members have inherent distrust, how do we communicate with them and connect with them?
Well, 30 years ago, I would say get rid of them because that person is toxic to your team. Since I've gotten older, I'm a lot more mellow. And I say you need to get that person into coaching or counseling quickly, because there's nothing that you can do from your perspective and where you are right now that is actually going to change anything. That person needs coaching and that person needs counseling. And I would say start with coaching to show them how toxic their disbelief actually is. And there's a lot of scientific and medical evidence to show and prove what I'm saying is true. It is very difficult to get a person to change their opinion without first looking at how they create their concept of self. To distrust someone, that's very deep seated. They have to understand emotionally what's going on within them and where those points kind of come from. If we have time, we'll go back to that chart about how the brain creates a concept of self a little later. But I'm being very honest with you. There's nothing that you can do, because no matter what you do, they're always on the distrusting side. Go back 3 slides, please. Go back to the amygdala prefrontal cortex slide, right, that one right there. Thank you. So they're always going to be a resistor, no matter what you say, no matter what you do, no matter what a team member says about them. They're going to be in protect mode. They're not going to want to partner with you, and that's going to be a problem. But that person is at that point very toxic, because their emotions and their attitudes and their behaviors and their beliefs are influencing everybody else not to like them. So it comes like a self-serving statement. I don't trust anyone. Well, they have a bad attitude, so nobody wants to be around a bad attitude. So the people that they do hang out with start not to like them because of their attitude. So it becomes a self-fulfilling, unspoken prophecy. So they're actually causing the problem themselves, but they don't know how to get out of it. So they will never become conditional. When they go into coaching or they go into counseling, they can then become conditional, because they will be able to see why they are the way they are. It'll take a little time, usually about 3 months, they'll actually get into the experimental side. They will begin to experiment. Hey, this person says, if I do this, this will happen. Again, they don't understand the language of trust. If they actually understood the language of trust, they really understand the you in trust, which is all about the limbic brain. So all the information that they've been processing has been processed from a skeptical point of view, and they've never been able to move into the wait and see, and they definitely haven't been able to move into the experimental. Go back to that other slide, please. So, yep, effective communication supports employee well-being. So we already know that, again, effective communication removes uncertainty from everyone. So if you're going to have a conversation with someone, then please make sure that certain things are very specific. If an employee has to work from home, you need to be very practical about what your expectations are. You may not have the same setup that I have in my home. I have a spare bedroom. My spare bedroom is my office. I have 5 monitors in here, 6 monitors actually, with my laptop. I have one computer where I talk with mental health clients and patients, and I have my other one where I do everything else. I do all my writing, I do all my PowerPoint presentation, I do everything on the other one. I don't have to do it in my bedroom, I don't have to do it in the kitchen, I don't have to do it in the dining room. If I choose to do those things there, I can, but I do have an office where I can be free to do what I want to do in my office. Other people may not have that opportunity. They may have to sit at the kitchen table. If that's the case, that's a common area. So you cannot be forceful with them to say, well, you got to get this work done. But if the kids are at home, the kids are going to be walking through the common area. There's going to be distractions. You have to be able to understand that. So there's some logistical needs that have to be understood. You need to be sensitive about what's going on. Again, when I say sensitive, not the touchy-feely type sort of stuff, but you need to be sensitive that they are working from home, and that brings on its own set of customs and rituals that everyone has to happen, okay? So also, mental health supports the mental health support is merging as a real big deal right now because of work from home. So you have to understand your organization needs to be in a position to respond to some of that. You need to be able to support the mental health side of things. Again, if you can't, then you need to get in contact with Vikas and Rajiv and myself so that we can help create something for all of you so that you can now have something that says we have a start. And it doesn't matter how big or how small you are, but you're going to have to start to do this, and because this is the new way moving forward. Next slide, please.
Don, we have a very interesting question here from Rajat. He says sometimes the culture of the organization does not support moving towards share and discover. how does one manage such barriers? Can we build islands of high trust?
Well, to be honest with you, it takes someone like myself to come in and talk with the organizational leadership. So there's going to have to be a sea change. You have to understand sometimes leadership, they don't understand. They just, again, it's task above relationship. So it's all about the task. What work is getting done? If you can't do it, I'll get somebody else in there to actually do it. Now, I know my partner Iris was actually in a situation like that where her organization didn't see things the way that she saw it. It was a very stressful place for her, but she was able to carve out um, islands, if you will, I'll use their term, islands of high trust. At the time, she didn't know it because she hadn't been taught that, but she did create islands of high trust with individuals. And because I listened to some of her stories, so yes, it is very possible. But Iris naturally um, evokes emotions from people. She's a very warm person to talk to. Her voice alone makes you pay attention to what she's saying. She has a very low melodic voice, so that it's very, very soothing to talk to her. So yes, it can be done. Yes, well, I mean, most of you know the story of um, Steve Jobs. He was the worst person to work for. Matter of fact, one of the persons that worked for him wound up leaving him and wound up forcing him out of his own company. That's how angry this other person was. He recently died a couple of years ago, and it is widely reported accurately that he did not have a relationship with his daughter. And I don't know if any money was left to her. I would assume and suspect that it probably was, because that's the way he thought. So you can be effective as that, but that's a very quiet place to be. That's a very lonely place to be. And I have no doubts that the type of cancer he had is directly related to the amount of cortisol that he was producing in himself and other people. So yes, you can create islands of high trust with individuals. That is not a problem. You can do that. Okay, next slide, please. So old or current business model strategies need to be defined. This is what we're actually talking about. So to me, and I hope all of you look at the coronavirus global pandemic as an opportunity and not as a hindrance. What can we do differently right now today that will make a difference in our organizations? And you know what? There are things that we can do today that we couldn't do just 4 months ago, but the coronavirus has placed us all in a situation where we can do things differently. You're in this class right now. Guess what? There's going to be more of this than face-to-face visits. Now, I'm hoping once we are able to fly again that I do get to come out and hang out with some of you guys. And so, yes, I do want you to know margaritas will have to be around, okay? So we got to have, even if it's a virgin margarita, I still want a margarita. So we have to be able to go out and do things. So look at your current models and say, well, what is it that we're doing that we could be doing better? Look at your supply chain. What can we do better? Look at your business model. What does your business model say about how you are going to attract customers? Nowadays, attracting a customer is more expensive than retaining that customer, because many customers will come in. But again, I told you there's a piece of paper that hopefully we'll get to in another session that determines your success or failure. And it's very easy to do. It's like 6 things that the top Fortune 100 and Fortune 50 companies actually do. And Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, he does this thing every single day because everybody knows the name Amazon. And he was able to capitalize on this piece of paper to put all the things together that made sense, that we all buy in or we're influenced by every single day. So can we develop a new business model? Is it time to review our IT systems? So governments now have to get involved. So we all know everyone's working from home, or at least 75% of the workforce globally is actually working from home now. That's high capacity, high loads on our internet infrastructure. Our school system literally crashed on Monday because all of this education was online, and it completely crashed after 1 hour. And I don't know if they got it back up. So they weren't prepared. They didn't look at their business model. They were not proactive. So we need to and nor was the stuff communicated. What was communicated is that some kids can go to school if they want to, and some kids can stay at home if they want to. That's ambivalent. It's also ambiguous. So we have a problem right now in Australia with kids not wanting to go to school. Parents want the kids to go to school, but the kids are scared. But yet the federal government is saying they can if they want to, they don't have to if they don't want to. Well, that's not a clear line of communication. So on that level, they actually failed. So we got to review IT systems, review your organizational structure. Review what you have been doing and ask yourself, in light of the coronavirus, does this still hold true? It goes back to the slide about how the brain creates a concept of self. The powerful part about that slide is that you can also create a concept of self about a person, place, or thing. So it's going to be time for you to look at that chart and say, what is the information that's going out to our employees or to our customers about us? And then you will see why people don't like you, or why people do like you, or why people could like you, or how you could be making a lot more money. So these are all things that are now going to come to the forefront. Next slide, please.
Sure. Don, also a time check. We've got about 15 minutes left.
Okay, I'm almost done, believe it or not. Because I don't have to say everything that's on all the slides. I've actually talked about them, so I'll wrap it up so that we've got some time for some more questions. So also review your HR practices and policies, and make sure there's a crisis plan in place just for what we're doing right now. What is the current structure of your workforce? How many people do you have working from home? How many people are actually in physical, brick and mortar place? Is that even necessary anymore? Is it possible to have 100% work from home force? If it is possible, you can look at some things differently. There's a cost savings there. Maybe you can now give someone a raise, or you can give the entire team a raise. Maybe the team member can go out now and buy a new house where there is a room that is available for them, or maybe you create a shared workspace, like many places around the world has. People go into a shared workspace. The internet's already there. They have everything they need, but they just don't work in a traditional office. So maybe those are things that we need to look at from a different perspective, but that needs to be communicated. Next slide, please. So what are some of the implications for the coronavirus communication plan? Real simply, there needs to be collaboration between boards for those of you that actually have boards. There needs to be an internal communication plan, and there needs to be an external communication plan. Next slide, please. So the collaboration between board and management, number one, ensure the crisis management team and the post-crisis planning team have good reporting flows. Again, let's be transparent. What is your organization going to do tomorrow that ensures a successful return back to normal as best it can? The CEO will need to get involved. The chairman of the board will need to get involved, where they actually do some talking, whether that's actually a video recording, or it's a Zoom meeting, or whatever the case may be. The person at the top is now going to have to share honestly about what's going on within the organization. And you're going to have to establish clear parameters for unified leadership communication. Remember, just because the person works from home, they still need to hear what is going on with the organization that they are a part of. So you guys should be sending out weekly, 3 times a week communication, how the organization is coming. Trust me, it will remove uncertainty. It will increase the level of trust. It will increase the information flow. It will increase that internal information that they feel and see and hear about the company. Next slide, please. Be aware that in these situations, there's always going to be a tension between providing accurate information and providing information quickly. I would suggest you don't get caught up in that. Just be truthful. If it takes you 2 or 3 days to get the information together and get it out, that's fine. President Trump did something that I don't think any other leader around the world did, and he did this initially. Once he decided to go, he went. He went and he has a press conference every single day. He's been doing that for the past month and a half. Other leaders have gotten on board, or other organizations, or sorry, other countries have done the same thing, but just not with the leader. Here in Australia, Scott Morrison, he comes on maybe once a week, but there is the chief medical officer comes on, that sort of thing. So if you're in a position of authority and you can alleviate some of the fear, then you be the point person in terms of talking with your team daily or talking with the teams daily. Have a check-in period. One of my neighbors, she's a mental health worker. So every morning between 7 and 8 o'clock, anyone's allowed to come on. They can talk about anything they want to talk about. They don't have to talk about work. It's working to a degree, but because people are able to alleviate some of their frustration and their fears. Understand who your audience is. Your audience happens going to be your employees. If you can talk to your individuals who purchase from you, do that, but do that through a text message or an email. Let them know how you're doing. Let them know that you're thinking about them. It goes a long way. It always has. One of the secrets to success is to communicate with people. Send something that's unexpected. If you send someone a text message they weren't expecting, it's a good one, man, it changes their entire disposition for the entire day. Next slide, please. Don't be afraid to talk in terms of scenarios. Hey, when we come through this, this is what we envision, or this is our vision for the company. Do it in bullet points, not not a long narrative form. This format that I talk in, it is a narrative form. It has to be this way. But I can talk in bullet points, but we would lose some of the context of what I'm talking about. Be prepared to agree with statements and positions. For example, what will be the organization say when an employee tests positive for the coronavirus? You know, if you know someone who has it, or you know someone on your team has it, you know, what are you going to say? What is the organization going to say? Are you going to check on that person to make sure that they're okay? You know, those are all sorts of things that you guys need to be able to do every single day. Those are things that you need to be able to get into. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop here so that we can actually have some questions. I am going to record the last 25, 30 minutes of this. And then when this goes out to you guys early next week, you'll get that part of the recording as well. But I just want to be very cognizant that there's going to be a lot of questions, and I want you guys actually to be able to ask questions. So Rajiv and Vikas, can we now open it up to questions and answers, please?
Sure. Thank you, Don. Participants, please feel to come in with your questions. We can now open it.
We'll have to.
Yeah. Sorry. One by one, please. The floor is open for questions. Anyone wants to ask a question? Please unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, Rajiv, this Krishnan here.
Go ahead, Krishnan.
Yeah, actually, my question was if a leader has a baggage of, distrust and this thing of the past. So, in a situation like this, how does he quickly build his trust and authenticity if he has a baggage which is not very supportive?
And I'm not saying that for I'm not saying that for my benefit or Rajiv's or Vikas's or Iris's benefit. It is something that in a situation like that, that person needs to know that they're creating a toxic culture. And that takes someone at their level or higher to have a conversation with them and to begin to rebuild trust first and foremost within themselves, and to understand what trust does for the body and what trust does for the organization, and how trust transforms people first and organizations second. So there's nothing that can be done. There's no pill that can be taken. Well, you can spray synthetic oxytocin in their office. If it's available in India, you can do that, and it will change their disposition automatically. But you don't want to do that because if they're not around the oxytocin, or once it's dissipated, they'll go back to their old self. So you do want that person to be able to have a deep and meaningful conversation with an expert that understands how emotions work.
Yeah. Thank you, Don. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Krishnan, for that question. Anyone else wants to come in and ask a question?
Yeah. Hi, this is Mahesh Gera. So I want to begin with a very light question to Don to begin with. Don, the first thing I wanted to know was how does one wish somebody a happy birthday on a webinar? And then I'll come back to you with my question.
You can just say happy birthday.
So happy birthday, Don. Have a great day. That was very, very wonderful. Listening to you was very nice. And I'll be very candid with you. You know, we are going through a barrage of webinars. Every day morning, our biggest task is to choose which ones to attend and which ones we could give it a pass. I was lucky to, start with you today morning. I was just reflecting on all the conversations that we had today. And one thought which comes and could be very cryptic and very challenging for the HR folks going forward. While touch wood, it is not my personal or my business situation. So this is for the other folks, not to get me wrong. But in the new paradigm of working from home, and it's a lot of because
Mahesh, your voice is coming in and out. We can't hear you.
businesses are evaluating new ways of working from home and new technologies. And okay, is this better? Is this better? I think somebody else is
it's a little better, yes.
needs to go mute. Are you able to hear me, Don? Okay. So my question is, in the new paradigms where technology is going to change the rules of the game, a lot of people working from home, a lot of HR folks, the organizations will have to be redesigned. There will be quite a bit of optimization in this communication of trust during this tough time and uncertain times where we do not know what is the length of this problem. How do you balance between potential optimization cases and the exercise you may end up doing a couple of months from now and your communication today?
You cut out just a little bit, probably at the key points. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do, if you wouldn't mind, is to actually write that question down, either in the chat box so that I can fully answer that question via email. So now let me try to answer the question. So how do we balance between what we're going to do and what may be changing just a few months from now? And that is the ability to be agile. So let's just say on the 28th, I think it is, you guys will no longer be under forced stay-at-home orders, and you'll be able to go back out. So that means that you should be developing a plan that will allow and tell your team what is going to be happening in the next 7 days, what's going to be happening in the next 14 days, what's going to happen in the next 21 days, and then we'll have a pause, and then we will look forward because new information will come in. Certain parts of the world will go into the winter months, and so, the coronavirus may be coming back or have a bounce back. We may have a vaccine for it. Not everyone will probably get the vaccine in time. So there will be a lot of information that will be rolling. And so if we create a plan that says, here is where this organization is for the next 7 days. You want a 30-day plan, and you want a daily communication plan. You may not necessarily need to communicate things on a daily basis. Maybe it's an every other day basis, but definitely it's a once a week plan. But then to tell them, again, go back to the language of transparency. Say, hey, we don't know where our organization is going to be in the next 90 days, but we do know where it's going to be for the next 60 days. So make sure your communication plan is based upon the available global information, and then you'll have to pare it down from global information and bring it down to local information. That is the best way forward. So I think I heard bits and pieces of that. But again, if you write that question down in the chat box, and I think that you did, then what I'll do is I'll actually answer that question a little bit more in depth, and then we will send everyone who's actually asked a question that way, we'll actually send it out to everyone so everyone can have the answer.
Hey, Don.
Thanks, Don. That was helpful.
Yeah. Don,
Thank
this is
you.
Rajiv. Just a time check. We've got 4 minutes left to wrap.
Okay. Well, we can keep the questions coming.
Yeah, Don, there is a question. I think you kind of answered that question. This is by Pradeep, and he says that it's about the paradox of whether to give the info quickly, where you probably may have half-baked information, or versus do you wait and not give any information? I think you kind of answered it, but maybe if you want to add to this. So as a management, do you just keep the information flowing even if it's half-baked, or do you stop the flow of information?
No, I think it's very, again, vital to be as transparent as possible. So if there's not the totality of the information available, then don't give a half-baked answer, because that just adds uncertainty, which then is going to set off a person's amygdala. Now, they can control it. They don't have to yell, scream, fight, and want to quit. But if you're giving half truths, then that's going to lead to uncertainty, which means they may trust you, but next time you send out another information, what's going to happen is that they're not going to take it as seriously. So depending upon what it is, if it's, we think we're going to have to, furlough 20 people, don't say that. You do wait until you find out from the board if you're going to have to furlough 20 people. What you can say is that because of the coronavirus, the organization is experiencing a great deal of financial upheaval. We may have to do something, such as we may have to furlough a few people. We're not sure yet. You could do something like that. But again, because you're being transparent, you're building upon the relationship, or maybe for the first time you will be building upon the relationship, but you just don't want to go out there and give half of the information when maybe an extra day will actually work. If you're going to be doing something daily or every other day, you can just state the status of the coronavirus versus the organization. Something like that. And even if that's every other day or 3 times a week, you give them an update how your organization is dealing with coronavirus on a global level, you're going to be fine.
Okay.
Okay, and with that, I'd like to say thank each of you. If there are any questions, please send those questions in to Rajiv and Vikas. I will answer them. So the next time you come back on, there will be the answers, or you'll get them before we come back on. I will record the last half of the workshop, which was internal communication plan. So some of the questions will revolve around that. So I will do that tomorrow, or if Vikas and Rajiv, we can schedule that. That will be done tomorrow. It'll take another 20, maybe 30 minutes. And then when they send out their surveys, they can send the complete picture out at that point in time. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Vikas and Rajiv. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Don. I think there are now, in the interest of time, we will have to kind of end it here. There are at least 3 more questions which are there. Probably what we'll do is we'll take answers from you and then send out mails to them.
Yes. Okay,
Right.
sounds good to me.
So thank you so much, Don. It was such a good, knowledge-driven session. This focus on trust and transparency, and how trust equals transparency, I think stood out for me. A lot of this focus on trust, I think it gives me a lot of for thought for how I manage my team and how to build that trust even during these pandemic times. So thank you so much for that. Thank you so much to everyone who joined in today. We understand a lot of people actually are saying, Don, that we are busier during this time than we were while we were going to the office. So you took out time from your busy schedules, and of course we know there are so many other webinars to attend and office meetings to attend online. Thank you so much. You took time and came and attended our session. The next session will be soon, and we'll come back to you with the details about that. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. And guys,
Thank you, Don.
we
Happy
will have the
birthday again.
recording on
Thank
our
you.
website in a few days.